This is Evidence of Love in a Case of Abandonment, One Daughter's Personal Account by M. Rickert. And it starts off, it's preceded by a quote from Randall Terry, founder of Operation Rescue. When I, or people like me, are running the country, you better flee, because we will find you, we will try you, we will execute you. I mean every word of it. I will make it part of my mission to see to it that they are tried and executed. And this is the story. It took a long time to deduce that many of the missing women could not be accounted for. Executions were a matter of public record then, still fairly easy to keep track of them. They were on every night at 7 o'clock, filmed from the various execution centers. It was policy back then to name the criminal as the camera lingered over her face. Yet women went missing who never appeared on execution. Rumors started. Right around then, some of the policies changed. The criminals were no longer named, and execution centers sprang up all over the country, so it was no longer possible to account for the missing. The rumors persisted, though, generally took one of two courses. Agents were using the criminals for their own nefarious purposes, or women were sneaking away and assembling an army. When my mother didn't come home, my father kept saying she must have had a meeting he'd forgotten about. After all, she volunteered for Homeland Security's mother and school programs, as well as did work for the church and the library. That's my mom. She always has to keep busy. When my father started calling hospitals, his freckles all popped out against his white skin the way they get when he's upset, and I realized he was hoping she'd had an accident. I knew. The next morning, when I found him sitting in the rocker, staring out at the picture window, their wedding album in his lap, I really knew. Of course, I'm not the only abandoned daughter. Even here, there are a few of us. We're not marked in any way a stranger could see. We are known in our community. Things get better for those whose mothers are executed. They are a separate group from those of us whose mothers are unaccounted for, who may be so evil as to escape reparations for their crimes, so sick as to plan to attack the innocent ones left behind. I'm obsessed with executions, though there are too many to keep track of, hard as I try to flip through the screens and have them all going on at once. I search for her face. There are many faces, some weeping, some screaming, some with lips trembling or nostrils flaring, but I never see her face. Jenna Offren says her mother was executed in Albany, but she's lying. Jenna Offren is a weak, annoying person, but I can't completely blame her. Even my own father tried it. One morning he comes into my room, sits at the edge of my bed, and says, "Liesl, I'm sorry. I saw her last night. Your mother. They got her." I just shook my head. "Don't try to make me feel better," I said. "I know she's still alive." My mother and I, we have that thing some twins have. That's how close we've always been. Once when I was still a little kid, I fell from a tree at Sarah T's house, and my mom came running into the backyard, her hair a mess, her lipstick smeared, before Mrs. T had even finished dialing the cell. "I just knew," Mom said. "I was washing the windows, and all of a sudden I had this pain in my stomach, and I knew you needed me. I came right over." My wrist was broke. To this day hurts when it's going to rain. I couldn't do my sewing or synchronized swimming for weeks. But I almost didn't mind because back then I thought me and Mom had something special between us. What happened with my wrist proved it. Now I'm not so sure. Everything changes when your mother goes missing. I look for her face all the time. Not just on the screens, but on the heads of other women. Not here, of course. But if we go to Milwaukee or on the school trip to Chicago, I look at every woman's face, searching for hers. I'm not the only one either. I caught Jenna Offren doing the same thing, though she denied it. Not mine, of course, hers. Before she left us, Mom was not exactly a happy person. What normal American girl goes around assuming that her own mother is a murderer? She even helped me with my project in 7th year, cutting out advertisements that used that model, Heidi Eigel, who was executed the year before. I remember so clearly Mom saying that Heidi's children would have been beautiful. So how was I to know that my own mother was one of the evildoers? But then, what did I think was going on with all that crying? My mother cried all the time. She cried when she was doing the dishes. She cried when she cleaned the toilets. She even cried in the middle of laughing. Like the time I told her about Mr. Saunders demonstrating to us girls what it was like to be pregnant with a basketball. The only time I can ever remember my mom saying anything traceable, anything that could be linked from our perfect life to the one I'm stuck in now, was when she found a list of boys' names on my TSO and asked if they were boys I had crushes on. I don't know what she was thinking to say such a thing, because there are 7 names on that list, and I'm not a slut. Anyhow, I explained they were baby names I was considering for when my time came. She got this look on her face like maybe she'd been a hologram all along and was just going to fade away. And then she said, "When I was your age, I planned on being an astronaut." My cheeks turned bright red, of course. I was embarrassed for her to talk like that. She tried to make light of it by looking over the list, letting me know which names she liked, Liam and Jack, which she didn't, Paul and Luke. If the time ever comes, and I'm beginning to have my doubts that it will, we're to choose one of the names she hated. It's not much, but it's all I have. There's only so much you can do to a mother who's missing. My father says I'm spending too much time watching screens, so he's insisted that we do something fun together. As a family, he said, trying to make it sound cheerful, like we aren't the lamest excuse for family you've ever seen, just me and him. There's plenty of families without mothers, of course. Apparently this was initially a surprise to Homeland Security. It was generally assumed that these women who had abortions during the dark times never had any children. But a lot of women of my mother's generation were swayed by the evil propaganda of their youth, had abortions and careers, even, before coming back to the light of righteous behavior. So having an executed mother is not necessarily that bad. There's a whole extra shame in being associated with a mother who is missing, however, out there somewhere, in a militia or something, with a vague possibility that she is not stockpiling weapons and learning about car bombs, but captured by one of the less ethical agents. What's the real chance of that? Isn't that just a fantasy kids like Jenna Offerson came up with because they can't cope? At any rate, to counteract the less palatable rumor, the one that puts the agents in the worst light, Homeland Security has recently begun the Locks of Hair program. Now they send strands of a criminal's hair to the family, and it's become a real trend for the children to wear it in see-through lockets. None of this makes sense, of course. The whole reason the executions became anonymous in the first place was to put to rest the anarchist notion that some women had escaped their fate. But Homeland Security is not the Department of Consistency. I think I can say that. It seems to lean more towards a policy of confusion. The Lock of Hair project has been very successful. It's even made some money, as families are now paying to have executed women's corpses dug up for the hair. At any rate, you guessed it. Jenna shows up at execution with a lock of hair necklace she says comes from her mother. I know it's Jenna's own hair, which is blonde and curly, while her mother's was brownish gray. That's 'cause she dyed it, Jenna says. I give up. Nobody dyes their hair brownish gray. Jenna's just gone completely nuts. Seems like the whole town is at execution. I realize my father's right. We're missing a lot by watching them on screen all the time. Besides, it's starting to not look right, never going. It was different when your mother was still with us, he said. So I agreed, though I didn't expect much. I mean, no way would they execute my mom right here in her hometown. Sure, it happens, but it would be highly unlikely, so what's the point? I expected it to be incredibly boring, like church, the meeting of the young Americans, or home ec class, but it wasn't anything like any of that. Screens really give you no idea of the excitement of an execution. If you, like me, think that you've seen it all because you've been watching it on screen for years, I recommend you attend your own hometown event. Just might surprise you. Besides, it's important to stay active in your community. We don't have a stadium, of course, not in a town of a population of 8,000 and dwindling, so executions are held on the football field the first Wednesday of every month. I was surprised by the screens displayed around the field. My father said that was the only way you could get a real good look at the faces, and he was right. It was fascinating to look at the figure in the center of the field, how small she looked, to the face on the screen, freakishly large, just like on screen at home. The women were all ages, from grandmothers to women my mother's age, and a few probably younger. The problem is under control now. No one would think of getting an abortion. There's already talk about cutting back the program in a few years, and I feel kind of sentimental about it. I've grown up with executions. Can't imagine what kids will watch instead. Not that I would wish this on anyone. It's a miserable thing to be in my situation. Maybe no one will even want me now. I asked my dad about this on the way to execution, what happens to girls like me. For a while he pretends he doesn't know what I'm talking about until I spell it out, and he can't act all Homeland Security. He shakes his head and sighs. It's too soon to say, Liesel. Daughters of executed moms, they've done all right. Maybe, not judges' wives or agents or anything like that. They've had a decent time of it for the most part. Daughters of missing moms, well, it's just too soon to tell. Hey, maybe you'll get to be a breeder. He says it like it's a good thing, giving up my babies every 9 or 10 months. I hate Mom, I say. He doesn't scold me. After all, what she did to both of us. Seems like the whole town is here, though I know this can't be right, because it's the first time I've come since I was a kid. That would be statistically improbable if we were the only ones who never came back. Even though I'm certain it's not the whole town, I have to say it's pretty close to it. Funny how in all these faces and noise and excitement, I can see who's wearing locks of hair lockets as if they are made of shining light, which of course they are not. I could forgive her, I think. I'm surprised by the tears in my eyes. She'd just do the right thing and turn herself in. Maybe I'm not being fair. After all, maybe she's trapped somewhere, held prisoner by some agent, and there's nothing she can do about it. I too take comfort in this little fantasy from time to time. Each execution is done individually. She walks across the entire field in a hood. The walk takes a long time because of the shackles. I can think of no reasonable explanation for the hood beyond suspense. It's very effective. The beginning of the walk is a good time to take a bathroom break or get a snack. That's how long it takes. No one wants to be away from his seat when the criminal gets close to the red circle at the center of the field. The closer she gets to the circle, led by one of the junior agents, as is the case tonight by one of the children from the town's various civic programs, the more quiet it gets, till eventually the only noise is the sound of change. I've heard this on screen a million times, and there's neighborhood noise going on, cars, maybe someone talking on a cell, dogs barking, that sort of thing. When the event is live, there's no sound other than maybe a cough or a baby crying. I have to tell you, all those people in the same space being quiet, the only sound the chains rattling around the criminal's ankles and wrists, which is way more powerful than how it seems on screen. She always stands for a few seconds in the center of the circle, but she rarely stands still. Once placed in position, hands and feet shackled, she displays her fear by wavering, or the shoulders go up. Sometimes she's shaking so bad you can see it even if you're not looking on screen. The child escort walks away to polite applause, and the executioner comes in position. He unties the hood, pauses for dramatic effect, and it is dramatic, and plucks the hood off, which almost always causes some of her hair to stand out from her head, so she's been electrocuted, or taken off a knit cap on a snowy day. At that moment, we turn to the screen to get a closer look. I never get bored of it. The horror on their faces, the dripping nostrils, the spit bubbling from lips, the eyes wet with tears, wide with terror. Occasionally there's a stoic one. There aren't many of these. When there is, it's easy enough to look away from the screen and focus on the big picture. What has she been thinking? How could she murder someone so tiny, so innocent, and not know she'd have to pay? When I think of what the time from before was like, I shudder and thank God for being born in the holy times. In spite of my mother, I'm blessed. I know this, even though I sometimes forget. Right there in the football field bleachers, I fold my hands and bow my head. When I'm finished, my father's giving me a strange look. If this is too upsetting, we can leave, he says. He constantly makes mistakes like that. Sometimes I just ignore him. This time I try to explain. I just realized how lucky I am. I can't think of what else to say, how to make him understand, so I simply smile. Right then, the stoic woman is shot. When I look, I see the gaping maw that was her head, right where that evil thought was first conceived to destroy the innocent life that grew inside her. Now she is neither stoic nor alive. She lies in a heap, twitching for a while, but those are just nerves. It's getting late. Some people use this time to usher their young children home. When we came all those years ago, my mom letting me play with her gold chain while I sat in her lap, we were one of the first to leave. I was not the youngest child in attendance. My mother was always strict that way. Time for bed, she said cheerfully, first to me, and then by way of explanation, pressing my head tight against her shoulder, trying to make me look tired, pressing so hard that I started crying, which I now realize served her purpose. My father says he has to use the bathroom. There's a pocket of space around me when he leaves. My father is gone a long time. This is unusual for the men's bathroom, and I must admit I get a little worried about him, especially as the woman approaches the target circle. But right when I'm starting to think he's going to be too late, he comes, his head bent low so as not to obstruct the view. He sits beside me at what is the last possible second. He shrugs and looks like he's about to say something. Horrified, I turn away. We just like him to talk at a time like this. The girl from the Young and Beautiful Club, dressed all in white with a flower wreath on her head and locks of hair a locket glimmering on her chest, walks away from the woman. The tenor of applause grows louder as the executioner approaches. We're trying to show how much we've appreciated his work tonight. The executioners are never named. They travel in some kind of secret rotation so no one can ever figure it out. For a time they get reputations. They wear masks, of course, or they would always be hounded for autographs, but are recognized when they are working by the insignia on their uniforms. This one is known as Red Dragon for the elaborate dragon on his chest. The applause can be registered on the criminal, who shakes like jello. She shakes so much that it's not unreasonable to wonder if she'll be one of the fainters. I hate the fainters. They mess with the dramatic arc, with the build-up of the long walk, the rattling chains, the executioner's arrival, only to have the woman fall in a large heap on the ground. Sometimes it takes forever to revive her, some effort to get her to stand, at which point the execution is anticlimactic. The executioner, perhaps sensing this very scenario, says something to Jello Woman that none of us can hear, but she suddenly goes still. There's scattered applause for Red Dragon's skill. He turns toward the audience. Though he wears his mask, there is something in his demeanor which hushes the crowd. We're watching a master at work. Next, he steps in front of the woman, reaches with both hands around her neck, creating the effect of a man about to give a kiss. We're all as still as if we were waiting for that kiss. With one gesture, he unties the string, and that same breath reaches up and pulls off the hood. We gasp. Mrs. Offerin's face fills the screen. Someone screams. I think it is Jenna. I'm torn between looking for her in the crowd and keeping my attention on her mother, whose head turns at the sound so there's only a view of her giant ear. The executioner says something sharp. She snaps her head back to attention. The screen betrays that her eyes peer past the executioner. First narrow, then wide. Lips part at the moment she realizes she is home. Her eyes just keep moving after that, searching the crowd, looking for Jenna. I figure. To suddenly. How can it be suddenly when it happens like this every time? It is suddenly. Her head jerks back with a firecracker sound of the shot. She falls from the screen. She lies on the ground, twitching, the red puddle blossoming around her head. Jenna screams and screams. It's my impression that no one does anything to stop her. Nor does anyone use this break to go to the snack shop or the bathroom or home. I don't know when my father's hand has reached across the space between us, but at some point I realize it rests gently on my thigh. When I look at him, he squeezes lightly, almost like a woman would, so there's no strength left inside him. They quickly cut some of Mrs. Offerin's hair before it gets too bloody, and bag it, lift her up, clumsily, so that first her arm and then her head falls toward the ground. The assistants are tired by this time of night, and load her into the cart. We listen to the sound of wheels that need to be oiled, the faint rattle of change as the cart lumbers across the field. Jenna weeps audibly. The center of the red circle is coated in blood. The cleaning crew comes and hoses it down. That's when people start moving about, talk, rush to the bathroom, take sleeping children home. It goes mostly silent again when the Offerin family stands up. There's 7 of them sidled down the bleacher and walk along the side of the field. I watch the back of Jenna's head, her blonde curls under the lights, almost golden like a halo. But no one, not even the most forgiving person, is ever going to mistake Jenna for some unholy. Her mother was a murderer, after all. Yet I realize she'll soon replace that stupid fake locket with a real one while I have nothing. She might even get to marry a police or a trash collector, even a teacher. The best I can hope for is a position at one of the orphanages. My dad's idea that I might be a breeder someday seems highly optimistic. Let's go, I say. Are you sure? Maybe the next one. He doesn't even finish the thought. He must see something in my face that tells him I am done with childish fantasies. She's never coming back. Whatever selfish streak caused her all those years ago to kill one child is the same selfish streak allows her to abandon me now. We walk down the bleachers. Everyone turns away from us, holding their little kids close. My father walks in front of me with his head down, his hands in his pockets. By the time we get to the car in the parking lot, we can hear the polite applause from the football field as another woman enters the circle. He opens his door. I open mine. We drive home in silence. I crane my neck to try to look up at the sky as if I expect to find something there. God, maybe. The living incarnation of the bloody pterodactyl, but of course I see neither. There is nothing. I close my eyes and think of my mother. Oh, how I miss her.